Going in Circles Around Saturn. Has Science Solved the Puzzle of the Rings? By Ken Croswell, Ph.D. Saturn is spectacular, boasting bright and beautiful rings. You can see the rings through a telescope. The edge of the outside main ring is a huge circle, 170,000 miles across. That's nearly 3/4 of the distance from Earth to the Moon. But the rings are just 30 feet thick. You could walk such a short distance in a few seconds. The rings are made of trillions of ice particles going around Saturn. Some of the ice particles are as big as marbles. Others are as big as horses and houses. Saturn is the Sun's only planet with brilliant rings. Jupiter, Uranus, and Neptune also have rings, but their rings are dark and hard to see. All of these planets are giants, much larger than Earth. What made the rings? Where did Saturn's rings come from? People have wondered for hundreds of years, ever since astronomers discovered the rings. But now Robin Canup, Ph.D., may have solved the puzzle. She's a scientist at the Southwest Research Institute in Boulder, Colorado, and she uses computers to see what happens when planets and moons interact with one another. Dr. Canup thinks Saturn's rings formed when a big moon smashed into the planet. Planets rock. Dr. Canup became interested in astronomy long ago. Back in second grade, part of our science book was the moon and the planets, she says. I liked thinking about whether there were other planets that might have life on them. There's no life on Saturn. The planet is too far from the sun and too cold, but Saturn was her favorite planet. It is stunningly beautiful, she says. Saturn has more than just incredible rings. It also has 62 moons or satellites. They go around Saturn just as the moon goes around Earth. One of Saturn's satellites, named Titan, is bigger than our moon. Titan is even bigger than Mercury and Pluto. Many of Saturn's moons, including Titan, formed in a disk of gas and dust that went around Saturn billions of years ago when Saturn was young. A possible solution. Dr. Canup thinks she can solve the mystery of Saturn's rings. She has an interesting idea or hypothesis about how the rings formed. She thinks that once, long ago, Saturn had another large moon just like Titan. After the Titan-like moon formed, it spiraled through the disk of gas and dust, moving closer and closer to Saturn until the moon crashed into the planet. Like Titan, the moon was half rock and half ice. The rock was at the moon's center. The ice was on the surface. As the moon got very close to Saturn, the gravity of Saturn was strong enough to begin to strip material from it, Dr. Canup says. That's because gravity causes tides. A tide occurs when gravity pulls harder on one side of an object than on the other side. For example, the moon's gravity pulls Earth's seas up and down. In the same way, Saturn's tides yanked on the big moon's ice. As the moon moved closer to Saturn, it passed through the Roche Limit. The Roche Limit is where a planet's tides tear things to shreds. So Saturn's gravity stripped ice from the satellite, says Dr. Canup. The planet started peeling off the outer layers of the satellite, but the satellite was continuing to spiral inwards. Dr. Canup thinks the ice particles went into orbit around Saturn and became the rings, plunging into Saturn. However, Dr. Canup says Saturn's tides didn't tear up the moon's rocky core. Because rock is denser than ice, the core resisted Saturn's tides. The rock plunged into Saturn. In the moon's place were glorious rings of ice with almost no rock. Dr. Canup's idea agrees with all the laws of planetary motion, but to test her idea, she needs to study more planets with big, bright rings. Giant planets go around many stars besides the Sun. Maybe some of those planets have rings as spectacular as Saturn's. If so, then Dr. Canup may be able to see whether their rings were made by large moons that crashed into their planets. The birth of Saturn's rings. Where did Saturn's spectacular rings come from? Dr. Canup's idea may solve the mystery. Billions of years ago, Saturn was bigger than it is today. Dr. Canup thinks it had an icy moon with a rocky core. If such a moon crossed the Roche limit, Saturn's powerful gravity would have peeled off the moon's ice layer. Trillions of ice pieces would have gone into orbit around Saturn, forming wide, flat rings. The rocky core of the moon would have plunged into Saturn, leaving the rings behind.